This week, we are asking you a very timely question. Should New York continue to rely so heavily on revenue from gambling? Vote on our website at wmht.org/NewYorkNow, or just email me directly at newyorknow@wmht.org. Why is this question timely? Well, New York is #1 in the nation when it comes to the percentage of gambling revenue the state takes home to Albany, and the trend appears to be headed skyward. Since 1998, there has been a 52% increase in the amount of money the state takes from gambling sources, which includes big hauls like the state lottery and not so big hauls like horse racing. With the Saratoga racing season underway and the governor's approval of a $2 billion gambling casino in Sullivan County, New York Now thought it was time to take a brief look at the state's dependence on gambling.
At the very end of the session, Governor David Paterson signed the Concord Development Bill, paving the way for a $1 billion hotel and casino project to be built in Sullivan County. The project is seen by proponents as a possible catalyst for the region to return to its once thriving heyday when large hotels like Grossinger's and the Nevele would bring in both comedians and tourists, as well as millions in tourist dollars every summer. Here's the plan. The racetrack and video slot machine operation currently in Monticello would move to the site of the former Concord Hotel in Kiamiasha Lake, where a brand new Las Vegas-style luxury resort built by Empire Resorts and Louis Capelli would take its place. The project is expected to bring with it 2,000 permanent jobs. Not surprisingly, Sullivan County Assemblymember Aileen Gunther is excited by the prospect, considering 4% of Sullivan County's population currently lives at or below the poverty level.
What will the developers get, and then what will the state get? What is the actual deal?
The actual deal is that the developer has to reach benchmarks. Right now...
What are those benchmarks?
Okay. First of all, we have to look at this whole project. We're looking at it as an entertainment city. So what this gentleman is going to do is he's going to take the racetrack, Monticello racetrack, rebuild a new racetrack over at his site and the horsemen, of course, endorse this, bring the racetrack upgraded, classy, places, someplace somebody would like to go, not just in New York, but people will travel the world to go to a really upgraded racetrack. Then he's going to take the VLTs and bring it over to that site too. So now we have a new racetrack. We also have the VLTs, 750-room hotel. Next, he's going to bring in restaurants. He's also going to bring some retail stores in. He's also going to do something entertainment for the children in terms of like a Disney kind of water park. So he's bringing in this entire package.
The Concord is just one of several plans on the table in New York to expand or open new racinos and casinos over the next few years. Many of these plans come with large tax incentives for developers. And New York isn't the only state to place a large wager on gambling, which gets to the heart of the problem. In our region alone, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Massachusetts, and New Hampshire are eyeing increased gambling opportunities. According to a new report from SUNY's Rockefeller Institute of Government, the proliferation of casinos and racinos has indeed increased overall gambling-related revenue to states, but at the same time, it's presented some new competitive pressures. And underlying the whole debate is the question of whether gambling is a healthy way to raise money. Quoting from the report, leaders in states such as California and Massachusetts have recently discussed allowing casinos as part of their efforts to eliminate budget gaps, but have encountered resistance based on concerns about pathological gambling and other social ills. Bob Ward is one of the authors of the study.
Gambling revenue of all sorts is more important to New York than ever before. We're approaching $3 billion a year. The question that arises is, can the growth continue? And what we see over time and in many states across the country is that the only time that significant growth occurs is when you are expanding gambling opportunities. You are drawing more people in many cases more dollars per customer, so to speak. So what we see here in New York is at a time when we're adding VLTs, as we have done in recent years in Saratoga and other locations across the state, now very likely down in the Catskills, there will be an injection of new funding into the state. What will happen over time, though, is that will be a very slow growth revenue item. So that what recent governors and legislators have done is to use the gambling revenue to provide kind of a quick fix for the budget.
Quick shot in the arm.
But we have to be aware that over time, that is not going to be a long-term solution.
Do you think that politicians could look at your report and see another opportunity that they could build even more casinos and more casinos? Because, as you said, the more opportunities for gambling, the greater growth in revenue.
Mm-hmm. Well,
or is there a tipping point?
Yeah, there are two issues. First is that there are still lingering social and moral concerns about gambling. We hear that virtually every time the issue comes up. It's an issue right now in Massachusetts and in many other states. But secondly, even just from a market perspective, at some point you are going to saturate the market. The Catskills were really one of the regions of the state that had not been host to a significant casino facility, and that people had talked about now for a decade or more. So assuming that that project goes forward, that again will produce some new revenue for the state, will produce some jobs in the Catskills, but it brings us closer to the point probably where New York State reaches the saturation level, and then we're going to have to try to think of some other avenues to balance the budget.
In New York, pari-mutuel wagering means one thing, and that's horse racing. Charles Hayward is the CEO of NYRA, the New York Racing Association, which has had a tough season. We caught up with him in the winner's circle on opening day at Saratoga.
A lot's happened since we left here on Labor Day of last year. The day after Labor Day, Governor Spitzer, then Governor Spitzer, selected NYRA as a franchise operator for racing. At that point, the Senator Bruno, and the governor didn't really see it eye to eye. So we went from September until February, when the franchise legislation was finally passed the Senate, passed the Assembly, signed by the governor. Then shortly thereafter, unfortunately, we had a change in governors. Unfortunate events led to a change in the governor, I should say. And we then took the details of the franchise legislation, went to bankruptcy court, got our bankruptcy court plan approved, and since that time we've been working with the state on a franchise agreement, a settlement agreement with the state, and lease agreements, because part of the whole deal here was that we were, in exchange for a 25-year franchise and some financial consideration, we've turned the deeds, or will be turning the deeds of the tracks over to the state. So we've had 6 extensions from the end of the year. We're on our 6th right now that goes through August the 28th. We think we're getting darn close. One of the final things that has to happen is we have to have the selection of the VLT vendor who's going to operate the VLTs, cohabitate with us at Aqueduct, if you will, and we're hopeful that that's going to happen, sometime in the next couple of weeks.
How much competition, how much will competition like gambling at the Concord, for example, affect racing, if at all?
Table games and lotteries and video terminals, they really are a different type of gaming. I mean, there's been some impact from, gaming, as you might imagine, but particularly in the VLT operations. The horse player likes to pick his horses, spend time working on the form, whereas the VLT experience is exactly the opposite. People like to go in, it's just, having fun, instant gratification. So I think that horse racing has its own issues, but I don't worry too much about competition from casinos and otherwise.
Nevertheless, back at the Rockefeller Institute, Bob Ward says New York's best bet would be to find new revenue streams or curb spending rather than continue its growing dependence on gambling.
We have become more dependent on lottery revenue. Again, at $3 billion, we're approaching the level that New York State gets from the main corporate income tax. It's more than the state obtains from all the SUNY tuition that all the students pay. So this is a significant chunk of money, and more importantly, it's a significant piece of the marginal increase every year. The big question with the state budget every year is not how will we pay for everything we're already spending, because we already have that revenue pretty much in place. The question is, how are we going to pay for the additional spending this year where we don't already have revenue growth? And that's when the drive toward more gambling revenue comes into the picture.
Currently, New York State is number one in the nation in lottery revenues, which in 2007 reached $2.35 billion. And a few final statistics. After adjusting for inflation, revenues from major sources of gambling increased by 26% from fiscal 1998 to fiscal 2007. But the rate of increase is slowing. Over the past 3 years, growth in gambling revenue has fallen by 50%. For more information on the Rockefeller Institute's report on gambling, visit www.rockinst.org. In the meantime, the new so-called Entertainment City to be built on the site of the old Concord Hotel is slated to open in 2010. As is the Seneca Buffalo Creek Casino in western New York, the $740 million expansion of Mohegan Sun in Connecticut, and 2 new Boardwalk mega casinos in Atlantic City, New Jersey. Also, the Mashantucket Pequot tribe, owner of Foxwoods, is expanding its resort in Connecticut while also pursuing 5 other casino projects in the United States and abroad.